Welcome to 216, the link to the Past Randomizer podcast. I am your host, Gear Agent. Welcome to the season finale of season number 4. Today on the show, we've got Alaszun. This one's been a long time coming. Alaszun has been on the show multiple times, but not to hear his story. We did a couple of drafts, and we did the tournament admins episode that he was on, and it almost became a joke that he hadn't been on a regular episode. But here we are, ending the season with Alaszun, and that's coming up here in just a second. Week 4 of the league just wrapped up. Team went 1-1 against the Findron Drifters. You can't be upset by that. Anytime you get a chance to split with a really good team, you feel pretty good. Ready for the mode to be over, though. Piloting, while fun, is just super stressful and not my favorite part of Rando. I was lucky to have 2 really good runners to pilot, though, so able to get the win with Gamachu and just missed the win with Shireen. I'd really recommend checking out that race. It was over on the Main Speed Gaming channel, and it was close. It's super stressful watching your racer enter GT at almost the exact same time as your opponent. And you just kind of have to watch and not interfere. And it's hard. It is so much fun, though. It's what I love about League. It's, you know, the team aspect, the chance to root for your friends, and, you carry the wins and the losses together. I love that. So this is the season finale of season number 4. Lots of thoughts, lots of thoughts. About December of 2022, I was still processing. I was still learning a lot about myself, going to counseling and learning about handling loss and tilt and all that stuff. I learned a lot about my relationship with competition and talked about it on the show in the past. And I'd kind of come to a crossroads where I wasn't really having fun. I felt like my time was over. I felt like I was done with both racing and the show and kind of the community, and just, I didn't know how to juggle it all. I didn't know how to play the game and be a part of the community and do the podcast and still enjoy myself. So I figured I'd take a break. I figured I'd stop racing, and that was kind of the decision. It was bigger than just Rando. I had to relearn how to play stuff competitively is what kind of happened. And so I ended up ending season number 3 early with the Relkin episode, right at the beginning of the year. And at that point, I had no idea. I thought I was done racing, period. I thought I was just going to be done. And I wanted to try to hang out with the community still, but I knew that if I'm not engaged, it's hard for me to stay committed to the community. And so I stopped racing, and I didn't really know what was going to happen with the show. I had the hosting until May of 2023. So a couple of months pass, and I'm trying to figure out what to do. And I figure I'll just do season 4. It'll be 4 episodes up until my hosting is up, and I'll call it a day. And I ran the show for a year, and that would be good. So I talked to Temp and Zelga and Humbug and Spleeby. So I told them that I wanted to end the show and that they would be my final 4 guests. And that was kind of the feeling that I had going into it. Let's just close it out and call it a day. And my Rando days are done. Then I talked with Spleeby, Tim, Zelga, and Humbug, and I just really enjoyed it. I really, really missed that portion of being part of the community. And as much as I loved it, I really did. I didn't know if I wanted to pay for another year of hosting just because I wasn't sure. I figured at the end of those 4 episodes I'd be done and I'd call it good. It was a lot of fun, but do I want to keep putting money into this? Some people stepped up and paid for the hosting, so that took away a big hurdle. Season 4 exploded. 24 episodes. This is the 24th episode of the regular season 4. And I also did 5 bonus episodes with the drafts and then the TARC admin applications and the council when that kind of blew up. So it's been busy. It's been busy. I've had a lot of fun talking to a lot of people. And I was able to come back and play the game a little bit and, I don't know, be able to be a part of the community. And I've loved it. It's been really good. I'm glad everything has turned out the way that it has. I thought the show was going to end after 4, and here we are 20 episodes later calling it a season. The plan wasn't 24. I think 16 to 18 is kind of what I'm going for. Dante started doing the Spoiler Log podcast on the regular, and I had to book guests because I didn't want to lose out on getting a chance to talk to them. So I ended up way overbooking season 4, but I've reconciled that, and I've been able to talk to the people that I really wanted to talk to. And there's so many people in the community still left to chat with. Most of all, I just want to say thank you for listening to the show, for helping me get here, for allowing me to have this place to kind of share myself and some of the things that I work through. I didn't imagine this would be a place where I talk about things like why I don't want to play the game, or why losing is so hard, or dealing with competition. And I hope it doesn't get too repetitive and sad, but I don't know. It's good to have this as an outlet, kind of just share what I'm going through. I like being an open book. I like sharing the things that I struggle with, because I hope that other people can take that and relate to it and use it in their own lives. A couple of things I've learned in particular during this season is breaks are good. Just taking a break is really good and really healthy. Another thing that I've learned talking with other people is don't be afraid to put yourself out there. You know, if you want to make friends, it can be really tough, but there's a lot of really good people in the community that are friendly if you put yourself out there a little bit. Learned a lot about handling tilt from everyone's different perspective. It's been really good. I don't want to point out specific episodes because I've really enjoyed them all, but there's been some times where talking with people, I get a chance to really grow and really learn just by hearing their story. And I really love that. I really love that. I love what 216 is. I love what 216 has become and evolved into, and I'm excited for the future. So I'm going to take a break. I'm not going to record any of season 5 this calendar year, but I do have some stuff in the works. Let's call them surprises. So just be on the lookout in the announcements channel for some stuff coming along that could be pretty fun. I'm looking forward to it. As far as when season 5 is, I'm not sure if I start like right in the beginning of the year or closer to February, but keep a lookout. Just keep those feeds active, and we'll be back with some more stuff. SG Live is just around the corner. Again, I'm not sure if I'm going to record anything. I don't know if what 216 is really applicable to con coverage. I know the Go Mode podcast is going to be putting some stuff out, so that might be the place to listen if you want like recap of what's going on. My show is more conversational, and I don't know if like sitting down to chat about their lives is something that people are going to want to do while at SG Live. Maybe, I don't know. But again, thanks for listening. I really, really do appreciate it. Everyone that chats about the episodes in the podcast Discord, anyone that messages me, any reviews, any sort of way that you've communicated that you listen and enjoy the show means the world. It really does. Like I'm in my office and I put these out and I just hope people listen. And I see the numbers, but they're just that. They're just numbers. And knowing that people listen and enjoy it just means the world. I hope 216 is a positive place for the rando community. But let's get to the guest. Today we've got Alaszun on the show. Alaszun is one of the first people in the community that I kind of connected to. So it was really good to kind of reconnect because we've kind of gone off into our own little corners of the rando world. And we'd always pick up here or there, but this was our first chance to like really reconnect. And it was fun, reminiscing on some of those early days where we were just learning together. That was a lot of fun. We recorded this before the finals of the Cross Keys tournament, and Wall Kicks did end up winning the whole thing in 3. So we're talking to the Cross Keys runner-up, but it's not all about winning and losing, and you kind of touch on that a little bit with Alaszun. So let's get to it. I think you're going to enjoy it. Here's Alaszun. All right, glad to have first-time guest Alaszun on the show. I know you're completely new to this podcast and the podcast format and everything, so glad to have you on. But seriously, dude, when I first started playing rando, I feel like you just were getting into it as well. So I feel like we had like an immediate connection, especially being West Coasters. We were playing a lot of rando at the exact same time and really, really getting into the game. And for a while there, it felt like we were hanging out a lot, and then we kind of find our own crews, and it's not like we disliked each other as far as I know.
No. There's like nothing bad happened, but like we just kind of naturally fall into your own circles, and,
exactly.
And stuff happens. Like I don't think there's no bad feelings from me. I don't think there's any bad feelings from you. Like it just kind of happened, and you're always like that guy that started about the same time I did.
Exactly. I'm doing the show to tell you that I do have a problem with you, Alaszun. That's why I wanted you on the show. No, I'm just kidding.
Excellent. I love hearing it. Thank you. Give my therapist some ammo. Let's go.
I'm super excited to have you on the show and for the season finale too of the season. You've done a bunch of shows. We had the tournament show that you stepped in for with talking to the different tournament admins, and then of course we had a couple of drafts that you stepped up for, and one the second one we did the Mario draft, but really, like, I've known you for quite a bit now. We've been playing this game for over 5 years, but I don't really know your whole backstory and like how you got here. So, dude, thanks for doing this. I super appreciate it.
No, I mean, I'm excited. I mean, I'm not super much of a podcast listener, but it's been fun dropping in on them every now and then to just kind of listen to people's stories and seeing how they come around, and how stuff happens. And I mean, I think it's a fun exercise for people.
Yeah, you're a super valued member of the community too, with all that you've done and all you do. And I mean, you're still running the game. You're in the Cross Keys finals right now. So you could say you're at the top of your game even. But let's start kind of way back. Like, were you always playing video games? Did you grow up with a NES or a SNES?
I had a NES when I grew up. I had Super Mario Brothers. I remember three games I had. I had Super Mario Brothers, Marble Madness, and some game on a gold cartridge that was called like Quattro Sports. See, you thought I was going to say Zelda, but no.
I sure did. I thought you were going to get a little cheeky there, but no. I've never heard of that game.
And it was just some dumb sports game. But I mean, I was a 6-year-old, 7-year-old kid who was like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing on the planet.
Sure.
And my dad decided I played too many video games. So after that, video game consoles were kind of banned in my household for a long time. And I was allowed to play stuff on the computer, but that was about it. So I was basically just like a PC game player until high school.
Really? You played that much that your dad said no more? Like that? I mean, was it? Yeah, did he over exaggerate or
he over exaggerated?
Okay. Because I remember my parents were like,
I was passing kindergarten with flying colors.
Okay,
I was doing great.
Sure,
I didn't fail a single class.
Okay.
I mean, both things are kind of true. Like I probably did err on the side of playing more than I maybe should have as a young child. But I mean, that's kind of the thing when you're like a young, and like especially like before you reach any sort of emotional maturity where you can kind of grip with things. Like as a person who has like always had various mental health issues and stuff growing up, like having something like this that I could jump into, that I could really go for, like was really, really great for me. And if I was not 6 years old at the time, and then I mean, obviously you don't have a fully developed brain at all at that point. You don't really understand what's going on in your body, much less anything else. Like I probably could have maybe explained like, hey, this is actually a healthy outlet for me. Like I see a lot of creativity in this. I see a lot of fun in this. Instead, it was something along the lines of, "Wow, Dad, you're really mean. How dare you?" But
Sure.
I mean, it was whatever. Like it's fine. Like
it was also the time, right? Like video games were really new in the 80s and the 90s. And especially the home consoles, right? There was some like arcade stuff that was a little bit earlier, but playing video games at your home and the consensus for parents for the most part was video games are bad, right? Yeah. And maybe not to any fault of their own, but that's just sort of the sentiment back then. It was like you got to limit video games, and there's some truth to it as well. Like you don't want to spend so much time, but there's also some real strong development stuff that could happen playing video games when you're young. For sure.
But I mean, like my next door neighbor had an N64, and so I would go over there sometimes, and we played, and that's when I played like Ocarina of Time for the first time, and Super Mario 64, and a lot of those like super foundational first 3D games. And then it was later on, another friend of mine kind of introduced me to this program, and as a speedrunner and as someone who actually does speedrun stuff now, I kind of laugh at this, but this like super fancy new program called ZSNES.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, look, you can play some of these old games. And the first one he got me into was Chrono Trigger, which I've cited to you several times as basically my favorite game of all time.
Right.
And it is.
It's on my 2 playlist, like very soon. I'm going to be playing that like here in the next month or so.
It's a phenomenal game. But it's one of those things where like I for whatever reason, like that was when JRPGs just took for me. Like I played them like, oh wow, this is like super fun. Like you're playing through a storyline, because like I've always loved like reading. I remember distinctly as a bratty fucking kindergartner going to the library and trying to check out 2 Hardy Boys books.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe you said Hardy Boys, because that was exactly the same for me. I love Hardy Boys.
The librarian says, you're too young, you're not going to be able to read those books.
Yeah.
So I showed that fucking bitch. I went home and I read both of the books in one night and then returned them the next day and checked out 2 more.
That's awesome.
And so, like, I always loved reading growing up, and it was one of those things that, like, before school did anything to kind of beat that out of me, and it never really got all the way out of me. It did probably stunted a little bit since I did most of my reading in terms of the stuff I had to do for school growing up. But I mean, even so, like I always did the like library program. They pass you out a thing and you get stamps for every 15 minutes you read, and then you get prizes every night. Like, it was an awesome. I don't know if that was a common thing across the country. I know they usually have some sort of summer reading program. It's what we did in Phoenix, at least back then.
Sure.
And so like just sort of being able to, it kind of like really just ended up being an accidental blending of those two sorts of things that I really liked, of like being able to tell like, here is a long form story with characters, but also you're kind of playing it and experiencing it yourself. And that for me was just a thing that was always like, whoa, this is so cool.
So was that the first time that you really remember being like enthralled with a video game, or did some of the earlier ones really like get you as well?
I mean, I don't think it was really the games themselves more than the what can we do with technology and like seeing some of the programming. Like I got into programming stuff fairly young. And so even like stuff like playing Warcraft 2 and doing like Warcraft 2 custom maps and stuff. And I was young enough that I wasn't good enough to like program like fancy scripted things or things. It wasn't even really till Warcraft 3 that you really had, or I guess StarCraft, that you really had the expressive language to be able to do a lot of that stuff. But even just like being able to do that was like, technology is just cool, man, on this stuff.
Sure.
And so I've always just I mean, I've always just been somebody who kind of has sunk into stories that way. And I mean, Ocarina of Time also, like, what as sort of my first, well, I guess my second Zelda game, it was the one that really kind of grabbed me that way. I also was allowed to play Game Boy when I was younger, so Link's Awakening is actually my first Zelda game, but I was only allowed to play on vacation.
Okay.
All right. Which had the very, very predictable result that anytime we went on vacation, I was glued to my Game Boy for the entire vacation because it's the only time I'm allowed to play it. Of course, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, come on, Alaszun, we're on vacation. Come to the beach or whatever. Like, nah, I gotta play Link's Awakening.
No, I need to figure out how to get through the second dungeon in Link's Awakening.
Yeah,
which took me literally 2 years. But
sure, I mean that game is hard as a kid.
Well,
I mean,
it was hard, and also the second dungeon has a room where to get a key you have to kill the monsters in a certain order. And I had no idea what the names of the monsters were, and so I had no idea what the heck this hint tile was trying to tell me about Stalfos and Baris and what the heck are these things?
Cole's voice type stuff, yeah.
And so it wasn't literally like until like the internet sort of came up a little bit, and I ended up on Game FAQs, ended up looking up and saw how to do it. I'm like, oh, that's how I do it. And so I finally actually got to play through the rest of the game. Eventually, but I mean, like really, like if we're talking my first genre love, it was always JRPGs for me.
Sure. But how old were you when you first discovered the JRPGs? Because it wasn't when you're a kid, right? Like the SNES.
No, it was like 12 or 13 at that point.
Okay.
Probably.
Okay. So you still were pretty young.
I was young. I was like early in high school at that point, basically.
How do you play Chrono Trigger if you're not allowed to play at home? Are you just going to your friends like as much as you can? I see.
We were emulating on the ZSNES, which let me play my legally created copy of the game that I definitely own now.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, pirating in those early days was rampant. Like I mean,
the Wild West.
Yeah, for sure. Like so much of my music and my movies and video games and programs and nothing was not available. You just downloaded it all. Now I have all legal stuff because I'm a grown adult that has some income. But man, I was
the shit back in the day.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so you don't get to play video games as a kid, at least the consoles. Do you still grow an affection for like the Nintendo stuff, or do you feel like because you didn't have the consoles?
Some of it. I certainly like. I don't think I had like really, really like these are my formative memories kind of things, but I played enough of this stuff like really young that I was like, oh, I always liked this stuff. And then because I kind of skipped the SNES at the time and ended up not really jumping until in 64, that it was like, oh, okay, Ocarina of Time is really cool. Super Mario 64 is really cool. And like, I mean, those are legitimately phenomenal games, especially considering the time period they were made and like the difficulty of just introducing those first real 3D games.
Right, for sure. So as you move on to like the computer games, it's more from I enjoy gaming, but I also like programming standpoint. Is that kind of your more
gaming when I was young, but there was also like little bits of programming. Like there was I don't I assume you didn't do programming stuff when you were young, but there was this little program called Logo Writer. And it was kind of the very, very introduction of it. And I don't know, you may have seen a thing called like Turtle Graphics or similar, where like it basically defined a programming language where basically you had a turtle on a screen and you could give it very, very simple instructions on things to do. So it would be like forward 10, left 90. And so they'd have you write simple things like that. And I remember taking a course at ASU over the summer for like this stuff for like young children. And I remember our capstone project, it was you got to make it play row, row, row your boat. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. Technology is amazing.
It really is. So I take it you're a programmer now, right?
I am. Yeah.
Yeah. So the love of video games bled into what you would end up doing as an adult as well then.
Yeah. And I mean, I always wanted to like when I was on computer games only, there was a lot of StarCraft, a lot of Warcraft 3, later on, a lot of World of Warcraft, although that kind of took me out of high school anyway. But like, even so, like, I remember growing up, I was like, oh man, I really want to work at Blizzard. It's going to be so cool. I'm going to get to make games and stuff like that. And I'm really glad I don't work in video games.
I know, right?
Like, as you get older, you're like, oh, this is a bad industry.
It is. It's
no,
so tough.
Thank you.
There's like no job like security at all. Things are always changing. It's incredibly insane hours and little pay. Yeah, it's not.
I'm real glad. Like when I was graduating college, I did send my resume off to Blizzard, and they never called me back, and I'm not particularly sad about it.
Sure. I imagine. So you mentioned some of the games you were playing as you started getting older. You said StarCraft and Warcraft. Was it all kind of that sort of genre that you were drawn to?
It was a lot of different stuff. I'm just like trying to think of the games I played a ton of. I finally tracked down PC versions of Final Fantasy VIII and Final Fantasy VII so I could actually play those games myself. And ultimately, my senior year in high school, my dad finally relented and let me get a PS2 so that I actually did end up getting to play 9 and 10 and those sorts of games that I like that run of of Squaresoft RPGs on the PlayStation is just an amazing run.
Sure.
And even not the Squaresoft ones, things like Legend of Dragoon and similar sorts of games. But yeah, like I also played stuff like I had Might and Magic 7 on my computer in the old like 3DO games that I really, really loved and played through a lot. And like I've even gone back to some of those games. Like one of the nice things about GOG, the like good old game site, is that they specialize in some of these older games, getting them running on newer stuff. And so I've actually played through a lot of those games again more recently and been like, oh wow, this is a fun little trip down memory lane. And maybe these games weren't quite as flashy or quite as good as I remember them being, but you know what, like for the early 2000s, mid 90s, late 90s, this is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's fun to go back and in retrospect reassess some of the stuff, and if you could do it with an open mind and realize, like, understand the limitations that they had and the way that they pressed those limitations was, I don't know, pretty cool.
Yeah, I as a programmer now, I am very, very happy that I live in a time where it is a lot easier to handle the technical side of things. And that I don't actually often have to worry about like, what clever thing can I do to cram this into 16 kilobytes of memory, because that is literally all the system can hold.
Right. I know there's always the joke as rando players of like, oh, look how well this, or look how good this game is programmed. It's like a joke, but like Link to the Past is programmed super well for all that it does.
I'm pretty sure I literally snap back every time I see someone make that joke, because I'm like, dude, if my code is running in 30 years, it is going to start wars. Like, I don't trust myself that much. Right. And this thing is like 30 years old at this point and playing through stably in a way that the game developers never considered or intended. Like, and I mean, obviously some of that comes to the devs of ALTTPR2, who are doing a good job of like decompiling it, rewriting some of the source code, handling things like that. But it's just one of those things. Like, it's like, no, like, actually, you may not be a programmer, so let me just understand. This is incredible. If I do something wrong, when you breathe on my code, everything dies.
Right. And the fact that it holds up as well as it does is just pretty incredible. And the fact that we're doing what we do with this game is pretty insane. So as far as competition goes, did you play competitively as you got older, or was there something that kind of like hit those competitive juices, or do you even have that competitive side to you?
I've always been a really competitive person. I try to be. It's kind of a weird thing to say. Like, I try to be really competitive with myself. So like, I don't tend to get too frustrated over winning or losing. I tend to get frustrated over I am not meeting my expectations for myself versus I am meeting my expectations for myself.
Sure.
But like, I played a bunch of sports growing up, and then as I got slightly older, it narrowed down to basketball and baseball. And then even so, like, I was on like quiz bowl, or I did some quiz bowl stuff. I did like all sorts of like engineering competitions and math competitions and stuff growing up, because I was, as you might guess, the coolest kid at my school.
I know all those quiz bowl guys were always
they were the walking gods of the high school.
For sure.
So it was one of those things, like, I mean, I always kind of have been that way, and I like competition because it gives you a way to measure yourself. Like, if I'm just like looking at questions and being like, okay, I know that one, I know that one, like, you don't really have a way of understanding, like, hey, what am I doing? Like, am I improving? Am I even good at this?
Right.
And so being able to actually like pit yourself against someone is always something that I've kind of been a fan of in that sense. And so competition has always kind of gone that way. And then as I got older, it kind of morphed into, I mean, staying similarly, I've always been competitive academically, and kind of, I'm not that bad, but I'm actually a pretty good person to have around on stuff like that. And I'm always willing to help people on things like that. But there was definitely a part of me that's like, all right, A minus, A.
Yeah.
Like, I could like think back, and like I could think of like in high school, which at this point was like 15, 20 years ago, I'd be like, oh yeah, I did all great on my AP exams. I definitely got 5s on all of them, except for AP Spanish, which I only got a 4. Like, and like, it's just kind of like you set your expectations for yourself. And I think it's one of those things that, like, as I've gotten older, as I've just sort of matured in my life, I've gotten a better understanding of who I am and what makes me tick and those sorts of things, and understanding how to motivate myself.
Sure.
And it's also why I try not to play competitive board games with my friends anymore.
I understand that. I mean, competition
they tend to not be my friends when it's over.
Yeah, I 100% understand that. I mean, competition is not bad, right? Like the competition can be good. It's how you take it, right? Like anything.
Absolutely. Competition is not an inherently good or a bad thing.
Right.
I think if you are the kind of person who just like grind yourself to the actual bone, because the only thing that matters is you win or you lose, and if you win, I'm so much better than my opponent, they suck, and if you lose, it's like, well, that guy cheated, I hate them, like, this is the biggest bullshit I've ever seen. Like, it doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't. And I mean, like their passion and things like that go hand in hand, and passion is a good and a very powerful force.
Yep.
But it's just never been me. Like I've always wanted to be the person who, like, if someone beats me, I want to be like, hey man, I'm happy for you. Congratulations. Like, and maybe I will be mad at myself. There certainly have been times I've been mad at myself after losses, but I try really, really hard to not be the kind of person who's like, oh, I can't believe that person only beat me. They're so lucky. Like, this person sucks. And I'm so like, and then some of that is just like, I don't have a ton of self-esteem in general.
Yep.
See generalized anxiety and depression, but and I mean, these are things that, again, as you mature, you work on and you get better on. And so I can be a lot more introspective on it now than I maybe could have been 10 years ago, when it's just like, I'm going to lie in bed and be sad.
God, it's like I'm talking to myself in so many different ways. Like, I wish it took me, I wish I learned this stuff before I was 40. Like that's one of the things that I've always struggled with. Is, for me, it wasn't so much like I get mad at my opponent. I get mad at myself. Like, I wanted to win so bad. And it's still a struggle. I want to win so bad. And then when I win, it's like, cool. That's cool. Right. That's fine. But
exactly like, it feels so like it's so asymmetrical, the balance of what you're doing. Like, if you win, you're like, yeah, okay, that's good. And if you was like, I suck, I'm the worst person ever.
Exactly.
My mother is ashamed of me and she's never even heard this game, but she's gonna call me up to it and be like, I talked to your father and we burned your birth certificate. You don't exist. Like, it's like so mentally unhealthy to get into that place. And like I'll slip there sometimes, but I try really hard to not get there.
Yeah, I think it was a big struggle for me in the last year and a half that I've realized, and I had to take a break from Rando because it was I couldn't handle it. I couldn't manage it. I feel like I've learned to do it, so I've been playing more and being able to manage it in a way, but it's still always going to be there. Always like if I start playing the game too much and then I start losing, which happens because I'm not the best at the game and it's randomized and whatever. I can't take all those losses because my self-worth just totally falls. But
and I think more than anything, it's more important to take one meta step up on that too and be able to actually monitor yourself.
Yeah.
And say, am I getting at this point where this is beating me down? Am I getting to the point where this is being actively unhealthy for me? And then find a way to step back and take a break, take a pause. Because honestly, those things can be really helpful and really, really good for your long-term outlook on stuff like this.
Sure. So as you were growing up, were you as enlightened as you are now, or was this a struggle for you as you were, being competitive as you were?
It kind of depended on the task. Like I was okay at basketball. I made varsity my senior year, but like it's a 30-point blowout. The spunky guy is coming in who's going to dive at every ball and like throw himself into the wall trying to save the play and like hang on the coach's every word. And so like if we lost, I was pretty capable of recognizing like, hey, you know what? It's a very limited amount that I can do here.
Yeah.
I played baseball for I was on varsity for 4 years in baseball, which is less of a praise of how good I was and more of the fact that we didn't really have any lower teams in terms of the baseball interest. But I was like always around the like first person off the bench, like 8th to 9th person in the order kind of person. But even then, like it was like just improving as a team felt really good, and I tried not to let losses there get too much on me. Like the only time I ever remember it getting over me was like our last game of high school for me was because we had actually my high school hadn't made the state tournament that we have. Like you had to be top 4 in your region to qualify basically, and we had not made it for 20 straight years.
Wow.
And our last game of the season, we ended up against the team that we were basically tied with for 4th at that point. And so whichever one of us won was going to get to go to the state tournament. And I ended up coming up late in the game as a pinch hitter and managed to work a walk. And blessed as I am with a fairly tall but also fairly blocky frame that does not move with particular alacrity, I was immediately pulled for a pinch runner who actually ended up stealing home and getting the winning run.
Oh wow.
So we ended up making it there. And that felt amazing. And I got there and we're in warmups and I play outfield, or I played outfield at the time. And I'm running in and I step on a baseball and turn my ankle.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
And so literally the one chance I have to do it, I sprain my ankle and cannot play. And I have to sit in the dugout as we lose to the number 1 ranked team. And we go down like 4-0. And then we come back and make it 6-4. And then like the next inning, the wheels all fall off and somebody who was playing in the position that I was in. And I'm not even going to say I would have made those plays. Like I know reasonably enough, like I was a very middling player, but it was really hard to sit there and watch from the sideline when that happened. And we ended up losing like 15-6. And literally, I think all 15 runs were unearned or something like that. Like it was just sort of brutal for me to watch. And I literally just ended up bawling on the bus home because it was just one of those times of like, you put a lot of yourself into that. Like any competitive thing.
Sure.
It doesn't feel good if you don't do that. Like if you just show up and you're like, I'm great and we're the best team, how do you know how it feels to win?
Right.
And I hope my wife can't hear me right now because she was like literally an all-American softball player in college and is like, I hit 450, you fucking suck.
And I think even that reaction of being upset is legit, like, okay, right? It's that time. It's those times when it becomes more than that, right? Like legit being upset that you put everything into something and it didn't work out. I think it's like a healthy reaction.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree.
But
and
it's when it becomes more, right?
It's when it carries, when it ruins you that thing happened, that it starts becoming actively unhealthy for you.
Right.
It is just as you mature, as you get better at reading yourself, like it's such an important thing to be able to do, to know and say, hey, this is unhealthy. I need to find a way to break this pattern or this is going to get bad.
Sure. Did this happen as far as like video games go? Did that competition
I was
carry
never
over?
really competitive in video game stuff before. I played RTSs at a very mediocre level. I was an okay raider in World of Warcraft and tended to be the kind of person who usually like ascended to an officer rank in the guild because I have generally not a lot of fear of like stepping up and doing things and making decisions, which I mean, a lot of people don't want to do it, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
And I have come to recognize that over the time, like I think I'm actually pretty good at making sensible ones, and even when they're not, I'm at least pretty good at explaining to people, hey, this is why I think these things are sensible.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really until I got into Rando that I got competitive on something, and that was not my intention at all when I did it.
Sure. Did you do any speedrunning before you got into Rando?
No.
Were you interested in speedrunning? Did you watch like GDQs, or were you like familiar with Twitch?
I discovered GDQ at one point. I don't remember which year it was, but it was like probably 2014 or 2015 at this point. And it wasn't until I think it was the summer after Andy and Christos did their GDQ run, which I'm sure a ton of people can cite as they're like, yeah, this was the thing. But one of my friends, who's one of my groomsmen or groomspeople at my wedding, and I like, and his wife loves video games too. Like their dog is literally called Midna, and she's a little shit just like Midna in the video game. But I had an SNES Classic at that point because I mean, like I said, like I loved the JRPGs on the SNES. I loved a lot of those old games. So I'm excited to play like Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI and all of those other games. But I kind of like saw them play the Rando stuff, and I think it was really after I saw on YouTube like an Andy stream, and God, I feel like such a fucking normie being like, oh man, I saw Andy stream on YouTube, and I mean, but like it is like how a lot of people like this.
It is, because I mean, Andy is the biggest streamer in Legend of Zelda.
I sit back and I like make fun of Andy's chat now, and I'm just being like, oh yeah, I was an Andy viewer.
I mean,
watching the Speed Gaming chat asked what's on pedestal, and someone was like, oh, it's the hook show. I was like, whoa, that's so troll. And now I like look back at myself and I'm like, I wish I could kill myself in the past from cringe.
For sure.
But like, so at the time I had an SNES Classic, and I kind of looked at like, how do you play this? And I found out a way you could mod the SNES Classic so that you can install your own ROMs on it. And so as kind of a surprise to him, I figured out, hey, how do we do this? How do we install a seed, and manage to generate our first sort of standard mode seed? Because it was right in the middle of that tournament, the like Swiss tournament with standard, where everyone was playing all the like different escapes and cool things like that. And honestly, I think I kind of missed, because I thought that was a fun viewer experience, at least for the way seeds started. It
was so fun. And I remember distinctly people being afraid of bomb starts because no one had practiced them at this point, right? Like it's so common now, especially as cross keys runners, that give me 6 bombs and I'll go do escape, no problem. But back
what if you could troll RNG on the rats? No.
I know it was, but I mean that tournament was super influential in getting me and a lot of other people into the game.
Because really, when I started watching speedrun stuff, it was mostly like I was watching RPG speedruns. And even that was less about like I'm super into the speedrun and more about just like I'm enjoying watching these games I really like get played. And the fact that they're fast is nice, but it's more that I can just like have cool. I have good memories of this part of Final Fantasy IX. This is fun.
Mm-hmm. Is that where you watching when you first started watching Twitch? Was like Final Fantasy?
Yeah.
I'm probably mostly Final Fantasy, right?
That and the bad game, which might be acronymed with the initials LOL that we won't talk about. But I mean that was on Twitch as well too. But like in terms of speedrunning stuff on Twitch, like I started finding like various who were like just RPG speedrunners, and they were just kind of fun for me to watch and keep going. Like I don't really watch any of them anymore, but I remember like Seven Sins, who actually was in that Zelda tournament. Was someone that I watched for a while because I was looking for like Final Fantasy VII speedrunners, and he's I think he made Twitch partner or is like sort of on the low. Like I mean, like those sorts of people. Like there aren't a ton of like ginormous I stream long RPGs all the time streamers, because let's face it, they're long RPGs.
Right.
But I mean, and then as I got there, then it was like, okay, I started discovering some of the people. Like I started watching all the races I could of speed gaming stuff on Twitch. And I mean, and then when my friend and I played, like he and I played the one seed. I don't think he played a seed ever again. I don't blame him though. Our standard seed took us 12 hours because we forgot about the waterfall chest and swamp, and it had our bow.
Oh.
So we just didn't know it existed. So we were just running around the entire game and be like, "Is this thing?" And it was like we finally, I think it was Sakura Sabasa's website that I like finally found and like went through the map of like what chests and just kind of did it one by one at that point until we finally found the chest that we had missed.
What was your relationship with Link to the Past at this time? Like, was it a game that you played a bunch on? I know not.
I think I had maybe played it once.
Oh, okay.
I'm actually not even positive I had beaten it before I started playing Rando.
So what was it about Rando then?
I love the logic puzzle, and I mean it's the same way that like you continue to see play is that like it's not like the execution and the getting really good at doing these things. Like I really enjoy the logic puzzle aspect of it. The sort of like, here are the things I have. Like, what is this pointing me to? What am I supposed to do here? And then I think as you get involved in it, there's also here are the things that I've broken that like I shouldn't have, which kind of is like looking at a logic puzzle, but then like looking 3 steps ahead of where you are and using that to sort of backfill your puzzle more efficiently. Like, I think that's a really cool and a really fun thing for people who are just kind of like analytically or mathematically inclined, being able to do that.
Sure. But what was it even about Link to the Past? Like, why did you said you found Andy's stream, but it's not like you were a big
I saw
the Past fan, right?
It was the biggest rando at the time, really. And so I really liked that idea of being able to go in and be like, hey, here's this thing. And it works really well. Like Metroidvanias / Zelda style, like all those things work very, very well with the randomization concepts. And obviously rando has been spread out to lots of other things. You have Final Fantasy randos now, you have Super Mario randos now. And I mean, they work and people play them and people have fun with them. But to me, it has never really felt as natural as the kind of game where it's like, here you have a world that you go and do anything you want, except there are a lot of things from stopping you from doing certain things. And so as you get items or techniques or whatever that will unlock these certain things, then the world expands more and more. But that's all it was with Link to the Past for me. And then
it wasn't like I'm a big Zelda fan, I need to play more Link to the Past.
No, and I mean, like Ocarina of Time was always my Zelda game when I was playing it growing up. As I think we've covered at length in the Zelda draft, when I didn't pick Ocarina of Time. But it just like it stuck for me, and it was one of those things like anything, like it's not really an outlet you get as an adult necessarily to be able to say like, hey, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to practice thing and I'm going to see myself get better at this. And it was during the summer. My wife was in rehearsal for a show, so she was out most nights anyway. And so I would sit at home in the living room with my SNES Classic, and I had 30 or 40 open seeds on there that I eventually played through. And I went from these are taking me 4 hours to these are getting me to 3 hours to like, okay, I'm starting to knock down to the like 230, 220. And it's like, I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like, okay, I could see myself getting better and I could see myself improving, and that becomes kind of its own reward at that point.
Right. But it's almost like not enough, as you're talking about when we were talking about competition earlier. It's like, you got to, sure, I'm getting better, but compared to what, right? Just myself, but can I beat other people? Is that kind of how you got into racing? Yeah.
And I mean, most of it is just like, I felt like, okay, I finally got good enough that I can actually do some of this stuff.
Sure.
And so I think it was really like when I got to, I want to say like when I sub-2'd for the first time, or like maybe it was when I got reliably under 230 or something for the first time. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna play a few seeds. I'm gonna start being. I went to SRL right now just to find it. And my very, very first race was a weekly. That was VT8 Randomizer Casual Open. And of the 53 finishers, I got 51st with a 218.35. And I distinctly remember this because I forgot to mark a crystal as the red crystal and Pyramid Fairy had the Fire Rod.
Mm.
And right there in 45th, we have Fear Agent with a 205.59.
Hell yeah, 45th. What date is this?
July 16th, 2018.
Gosh, yeah. So this is like right when we're first starting, because I think my first race was maybe May or July. Maybe I'm in July. Shoot. So were you addicted then? Like, did you start thinking like
I really, really started getting into it at that point.
Yeah.
Like, it was like, okay, this is a lot of fun. I'm really, really enjoying yourself. I distinctly remember at one point, and it's kind of cringe in retrospect now, that like one of my very, very early weeklies, I'm pretty sure I'm looking for it now because I know I was there, but I got like either in the top 10 or the top 5 somehow, because it was one of those seeds where you were like mirror from go mode. You had like 5 crystals open, and so every halfway decent player is going to start playing somewhat aggressively, and the mirror is just in a completely skippable Hera basement. That is like the first or second crystal that you're doing.
Sure.
And so I got that in like retrospect. I'm like, okay, it's kind of cringe that I did as well in that race as I did. But
Sure.
Also,
I mean, that's what draws you though, right? Like that's what kind of hooks you, is all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, I may not be like the best at playing this game yet, or my execution might be weak or whatever when you first start, but shoot, I can actually do well if things go right.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's kind of empowering. I mean, it's not just kind of empowering. It's definitely empowering in that sense to be able to say like, hey, I maybe don't completely suck at this.
Sure.
Let's see.
It also gives you a little bit of false hope too, because there's a lot of, and I don't want to be mean, because winning isn't everything, right? Like some people play the game because it's fun. They want the puzzle aspect. But when it comes to racing, it can sometimes, I know for me, where it's like I started to think, oh, I'm better than I actually am. It took me a long time to like realize like you gotta
I
get
found
better,
the race
man.
I was talking about too on August 10th.
Yeah.
I got 9th overall and Boyne got 12th. And I remember Boyne being like first or second in every single race I was in. I'm like, oh my God, I'm a god. And of course I wasn't. I got absurdly lucky in that one. But like, it's a super cool, like, oh wow, this is actually kind of a thing that you can get into. But yeah, so it's I mean at that point, like once you kind of get into the competitiveness of it, and once it, like, as long as it's not being negative, as long as it's not kind of dropping you, like it's one of those things that can be a healthy outlet for that sort of stuff.
For sure. Did you start entering tournaments?
I think the next year, so it would have been 2019, was the first time I tried to qualify for the main tournament. And I actually told this story last night to someone, so it's kind of fresh in my mind. But I mean, like, I had never really done any serious amount of streaming before, so I didn't super know what I was doing. And I ended up in the tournament qualifier that I did best in. I ended up streaming a like starting soon screen for like 20 minutes or 15. It was like somewhere from 15 to 20 minutes. And I was always raised as a like, hey, like you should be an honest person. You should try to like if you make a mistake, you should confess these things to people and be like, hey, I messed up, and there might come with punishment. And I was hoping, because at the time it's not like I was in a particularly good position in the seed. Like I was certainly well behind average at the time. Then I was like, yeah, okay, it was just like 20-25% of your run. Like that's like try not to do it again, but it's not a big deal. So I went to one of the tournaments. I asked one of my friends at the time, who I will not name, even though I'm pretty sure he knows who he is, because he felt really bad about what ends up happening here. And I'm like, hey, should I go to an admin about this? And they said, yeah, you probably should. So I did. And I got disqualified from the race. And it felt really bad because that was pretty much my chances of qualifying for the tournament there. Completely gone.
Yeah.
Like I probably wouldn't have made it anyway. Like I can now long enough ago that I can sort of look back and accept, yeah, okay. But it's also where Challenge Cup ended up starting too, because there was a few of us who were like, hey, it kind of sucks that if you miss the main tournament, like there just isn't an avenue for you. And so I think it was Fajita Knight at the time was the other person who was really, really interested in it. And he and I kind of ended up starting Challenge Cup as kind of I mean, honestly, selfishly, hey, I would really like to have a secondary venue to be able to compete in something like this. And I at least can say I'm not a hypocrite because I've continued to support it and continued to run it, even though I have not been in Challenge Cup for like another. I think I was in it the next year, and then after that, I've never been in Challenge Cup. I either have qualified or just haven't tried to qualify for the main tournament, depending on the year.
No, I think I love the idea of the Challenge Cup. I think it's good for the community. It's good for runners just to get that opportunity to play competitive, like tournament style stuff, especially back then because there wasn't a ton of tournaments going on. Now it's a little bit different, but
there was the main tournament and there was Challenge Cup for the longest time.
Right.
And there might have been like some small internal tournaments that had no publicity whatsoever, but it was literally just those two.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was really until Cross Keys came around that it was actually like, oh, wait, we can actually run our own tournaments. And obviously now there's proliferation. You have the 80 Keys tournament, the Casual Boots tournament, the Casual 80 Keys Boots 6-7 Fast Cannon tournament, right. the Steve Splendiferous Saturday tournament.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Every time I see someone ping for a race with a stupid alliterative name like that, I want to make some offhandedly snarky comment like, come on, man.
Sure.
But back then there wasn't.
No, there wasn't. It was the main tournament.
I thought it was really good to have a niche for other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, Cross Keys ended up in a similar way that it was like, hey, there's a community here of people that enjoy playing this stuff. Like, we may not get a lot of people into it, but let's see what we can do. Let's see what we have.
Yeah.
And if we can get people to get interested in this stuff, like I think when we first did the Cross Keys tournament, we were probably expecting like maybe 20, 30 people to sign up. And it did not go that way. I think we had 60 something in the first year, and it's grown. Actually didn't grow this year. It actually got like 6 people smaller, but like when you're at 160 people, like you're at a
right.
tangible upper limit on how much you care about how many people are joining the tournament.
Yeah. At a certain point, it's just like you can only take so much.
If people aren't going to have fun in a tournament, I'm glad if they don't join.
Sure.
Like, I wish that any tournament I'm throwing is one that they are going to have fun in it, but if they're not going to, like, I'm not going to hold joining a tournament.
Yeah.
I think it's like anything else. Like, it's important to manage your burnout. It's important to manage your interest level, because if you try to join every single tournament, if you try to join every single ladder race, if you try to join every ramps up, you are going to burn yourself out.
Mm-hmm.
And the more aggressively you do it, the worse you get. And you're either going to burn yourself out and realize it, or yourself out and not realize it, and you're going to make a lot of people really start disliking you.
Yeah.
Because when people get burned out, when they stop having fun, that's when people just start being absolute salt piles that like nobody wants to be around.
Right. For sure. So do you remember, the casual Discord was pretty hot back then.
I do.
And I brought the idea of creating a league in the Discord up, and you were one of the only people to respond with ideas and like critiques and criticisms on how to make it better. Do you remember that?
I don't specifically remember that.
Do you remember what I first proposed for the league?
I don't. Although I'm now very interested in hearing what it was.
Okay, so it was always a team thing, and it was trying to. It was like burnout, because everyone was getting burned out just on the one main tournament, because the main tournament was so long, and you're doing like, I don't know, 6 races a week or something. It was like it was
aggressive.
It was a lot, and people would just get burnt out. So I was like trying to come up with an idea of like a team tournament where you're not running a ton. But mostly what we were doing was group races. We weren't doing a lot of one-on-one races. So the original league setting was weekend races, and you would race as like a team, not like co-op, but you would just get points based off of where you finished as a team or something like that.
I almost certain, like, I'm sure I gave you critique because I've done a lot of tournament stuff both in here and also like in real life and just sort of organizing those sorts of things. Like, I'm not good at like event logistics. I'm like, let's go find a venue. Let's make sure we have refreshments. Let's work with vendors and like, I'm terrible at that shit.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm pretty good at being like, okay, let's design a format that's going to be fair. Let's figure out what is going to be interesting to people and sort of a fun way for people to be able to play. And I've always loved team-based stuff.
Yeah.
And like, I've been a huge proponent of like team-based ideas on these things, because one of the things that I found, and I think it's even more true after voice race or like being in voice calls and races got banned, is unless you're someone like an Andy or like unless you're someone that's like sitting there routinely with like 20 or 25 viewers, it can be pretty lonely playing this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I have maybe one person in chat while I'm playing a 2.5 hour speed, like it gets pretty isolating. And so like one of the nice things about team environments, whether it's you're playing together or whether it's like, hey, we're competing as a team together, even though it's a bunch of one-on-ones, is it gives you people invested in you. It gives you people in your corner. It gives you a social outlet to like it gives you a lot of things that are just very inherent to counter some of the stuff that I think maybe doesn't work quite as well.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons like I've always been very in terms of really not liking the voice call ban, and I understand why some people have objections with it, and I'm not trying to pretend that there is no merit to it, but like it's one of those things where like at the end of the day, like this is a game people are playing.
Yeah.
The more you are trying to legislate it, the more you try to make it, hey, let's make this less fun or like less open. Like you're just kind of cutting off access to people for various reasons. Like either like if I'm in a conversation with someone and there's a race going and I'm ho-hum about whether I want to join, I'm not breaking off a conversation with that. If there's a race I really want to join, then like, yeah, maybe I'll say, hey, I'm going to race. Like, okay, I'll talk to you later. But if I can keep if I can have something entertaining to do for a bit while also keeping my chat, like it's something else. And I doubly understand why people would have issues with people like being in the same voice call in the same race, especially when not everyone is there. And I understand a lot on how those sorts of things. But I mean, I think like it all kind of points to the same thing, which is just that like having people around you, having people to talk to, like having people to support you is stuff that's just kind of inherently healthy and really cool to do. And it's another good way of pushing yourself because you have people who have incentive to make you better. And some people are the kind of people that are happy to just like take anyone they meet and just be like, hey, I'm happy to help you. Like ask me whatever you, but not everyone is. And there's nothing wrong with not being that way. But some of those people have a lot of smart things to say that can really help people improve.
Yeah. I don't know where I fall on the whole voice call thing. Like I remember it being a big splitting point in the community for sure when that happened.
I mean, like when it got banned full stop, I stopped racing for a really, really long time.
Yeah.
For literally that exact reason is that like never had a race I really race and like it's worth ditching this conversation I'm having with friends. And like over time you find a balance, or maybe you're like, hey, these are the things as I have gotten more used to this, I have done better at curating the stuff that I'm interested in and not forcing myself to do the stuff that I'm not interested in.
Sure. I feel like, okay, so there was a group of people that you were hanging out with, Goomba, Lynn, Illis, Dracaris, a lot of guys over in Europe. And it feels like you guys all kind of went over to Ocarina of Time Randomizer too, around the same time that all this like voice call stuff. Did that play into you dipping your toe into Zooter?
It wasn't I mean, I was already playing Zooter at that point.
Okay.
It wasn't a non-factor, and it definitely pushed me over there. And I mean, like I did, like I take breaks from this, when this cross keys tournament is done, I'm stepping away from Link to the Past for a while, and I'm probably going full Zooter mode for a while, just because it's healthy to take breaks. And like, I'm not even remotely burned out right now. I'm loving this tournament. I'm loving the mode still. But it's just healthy.
Yeah.
So I was already kind of naturally in that, but it made it really hard to want to come back. And at least for me, the thing that made it really, really hard to want to come back is I don't really have any interest in being part of a community that's just like full of passive aggression and like pure anger and stuff, and just like lots of people being like, oh, anyone who beats me cheats, or like lots of snide remarks being made by people in Twitch chat about how like, oh, this guy just glanced at the other person's stream. Like, it's just such an inherently negative place to be. And it's one of those things, like when you go down that road, like you can start making that argument about just about anyone.
Yeah.
And it's just unhealthy. And like it's one of those things, like let me be very clear on this. If you cheat at this game in like for fun competitions on these things that people are doing with no stake, and even if you do it with things that are stakes, you suck. Like genuinely, you fucking suck.
Yes. Yeah.
But I absolutely fucking refuse to let those people who do that dictate how I am going to consume and how I am going to enjoy myself on this stuff.
Sure.
And it definitely felt, especially at that time, that like things started getting very, very on some of this stuff. And it's just a gross look. And
do you think it's gotten better?
Yes, a little bit. Yes, mostly.
Okay.
There are still some times that I see stuff and I really, really don't like it. And I think there are like, and if you have genuine feelings about this,
you're never going to get away from it completely, right? Like,
no. But like, I don't have a great way of saying this without actually like adding. I'm just not going to say who it is, but like when you have a major tournament and you have like deep bracket runners in the tournament just in Twitch chat calling each other cheaters, like it's gross.
Yeah.
And like that still happens, and there is no reason why that needs to happen, and it doesn't really serve any purpose or really do anything good for anyone. I mean, but you're right. Like, you're never going to get to the point where it's like there's nobody who thinks anyone cheat. Like there are people in the community that I think are suspicious, but I also don't surface it to people because I don't have proof. I haven't done the work to get proof, and the cost of being wrong is huge. And it's not fair to the people if they're playing legitimately. And so I'm just going to say, you know what? Like, I have no interest in playing this game as a cheater, but I have equally no interest in like being I'm going to start the Inquisition that's hunting everybody down over this stuff.
Sure. Yeah, I get that. It's tough. It's tough. Like, you don't want to be around it, but you also don't want to participate in finding it, right? Like, I get that.
I've done some of this stuff. Like when we banned Bolt way back in the day, like that didn't necessarily start with cross keys admins, but I know one of the branches of it started with Lynn and I watching a race that we were very, very suspicious of, and then he and I sat down and just went through the race like in Zapruder film detail, like documenting every single thing until we made the point and said, yeah, we think we actually have a pretty good case here.
Yeah.
But that's not fun to do. And it's one of those things that like, I feel really genuinely not sad for the people who are doing it. Like, it's super important work, but it's saddening work.
Sure. I mean, it is for us, for people that take it on. There is people that are able to enjoy doing it in some weird, gross way, but it's, you know, I think it's more of a personality thing. I don't think
people who enjoy doing that should be doing it.
I don't know. I think if you're
I think you're doing something that's serious enough at that, or as serious as you can get in a kind of for fun hobby on this stuff, that if you are enjoying doing it, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to take it appropriately seriously with the gravity. Like
maybe enjoying is not the right word, but they're good at doing it. If you're looking
for a way to, sure, absolutely. And there are people who are good at doing it. That's good. But like, if you're the kind of person who is looking for a way to be like, oh yeah, people ban, like,
yeah,
you really shouldn't have that power.
Then you're just an asshole too, right? Like, yeah,
legitimately, you are literally just an asshole if you're doing that.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about those ones that are good at doing it, and they're like proficient at finding and, you know, like breaking down and realizing what is going on and how to do it. I'm not one of those people. Like, I cannot. I will never be a part of the CIC, you know, even though I'm a Tark admin, I couldn't be. But when I'm not a Tark admin, I don't put my name on the list of the CIC. I don't want to do it.
Nobody reached out to me. I would actually probably be pretty decent at it. But let me tell you, I don't want to do it.
Yeah, it sucks. It sucks.
It would make me really sad.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your time speaking of being sad, of being over at the Zooter community, because I don't really know much about the Zooter community. I know that you've been through a lot, man. I know that they've dealt with cheaters and a bunch of shitty stuff too that you've been around. But overall, is your time with Zooter been good? And has it been maybe less involved?
No.
Okay.
I'm a tournament admin in Zooter too. I don't know.
Okay.
Hubs and I started the multi-world tournament in Zooter, which has its own like that was like that entire thing started as literally a Google Doc for me that was like, hey, I have a proposal for this crazy thing that I don't know if anyone's going to be interested in. But I mean, we've run it 3 times now and looking to run it towards the somewhat near future. And so, like, it's not nearly as big as, like, the Cross Keys tournament or any, like, Cross Keys is the biggest tournament. Challenge Cup might actually be the biggest tournament I work on in terms of pure numbers, but in terms of, I think, profile cross keys is the biggest one that I work on. But I still have to worry about some of that stuff to some degree.
Sure.
I mean, it's one of those things, like, I think Ocarina has had a good number of cheaters. It is also almost easier to catch a lot of them in some ways because of how big the game is.
Yeah.
Here's how much do you know about Ocarina of Time, Rando? Sorry,
0. I know next to 0 about Zitter. Yeah.
So I like Ocarina of Time as a game. I think on the whole, it is too big of a game to be able to be played in a normal sort of randomized way. And I think the developers and the people who did throw tournaments together also mostly agree on that. And so what has come into play, and it's come into play in Ocarina of Time, it's been duped and I think modified to agree now in Majora's, I almost said Mystery Mire, in Majora's Mask, is the hint system in Ocarina of Time is is done in a way that I really like, and I think really, really improves the game. Which is, for those of you who haven't played, like you, so basically the way the hint stones are generated in the seed, at least in competitive settings, obviously there's tons of different ones, is that you get sort of like like certain sets of hints that are always kind of guaranteed to get there. Or to be there. So, like, in Season 6 of OTR, which was the last main tournament, and the only one I actually qualified for the main tournament in, we were guaranteed 5 Way of the Hero hits. Way of the Hero is basically a way of saying it looks at the playthrough of the game, and if an item is Way of the Hero, is if you pull that item out of if the game is no longer available. Most items that you need are Way of the Hero, but like there are 3 bows in Ocarina of Time. So if one bow doesn't lock the other 2, that bow's not going to be Way of the Hero. But then you will get a hint of some kind that something's like, hey, Gerudo Valley is Way of the Hero or something. And actually in Season 6, they even modified it. They changed it to a pass system where it, rather than just being like, you need this to beat the game, it's you need this to beat a specific boss. So like, you will find like, hey, this item is on the path to Bongo Bongo, who is the boss of Shadow Temple, for those of us who do not play Ocarina of Time. And so if I go in there and I see that a hammer is on the path to Bongo Bongo, which is an item that does not traditionally lock Shadow Temple, that can tell me a lot of things about how the seed can shape out. So you have a game that is like very, very low, but you also actually end up getting a lot of direction. And for the me that like really, really these like analytical pieces of this, I love it so much. Like I love the way that it works, and I will quibble with like individual bits of the way that like things work, but I love the idea of it. And then there are other ones, like sometimes then you'll have like a pile of, here are some bad checks that you will tell you what is in that bad check if you read the hint. It's not. And then there's a set of, here are things that will always be hinted in a seed. So what song in Ocarina of Time is always hinted, because that is the Ocarina of Time equivalent of the pedestal. Only it is much more likely to be required because there are 2 songs at least that 100% guarantee that you need to do all dungeons with no sequence breaking around it whatsoever. And then there are others that could be logically relevant, necessarily actually relevant in terms of what you do. And like, so all of this builds a lot of information and ammunition that you can then use to try to deduce where stuff is in the scene. And I mean, ultimately Rando's going to Rando. And so you can't, it's not like this is a solved puzzle. Like you read the hints and be like, here's the 17 important items in the seed, and I know where every single. So it's not that.
But it helps cut the time down, right? Like
it helps cut the time down, and it's a very, very skill to be able to sort of take this information and quickly apply it to the decision tree that you have to be able to come to better decisions. And as somebody for who it's like the logic puzzle aspect of it is my main draw, I think it's great. And so even though I don't actually enjoy the gameplay of Ocarina of Time as much as I do Past anymore, just because the 3D hasn't aged super gracefully, I really love what the developers of the game have done with Ocarina of Time.
Sure.
As a rando.
Sure.
And I understand why we don't have hints and Link to the Past, and I'm not sitting here clamoring for hints and Link to anything like that.
I hated it so much. I was like, when I was on the council, like when they first started the council, that was like my one platform is like, get hints the fuck out of here.
Version 30, big feature, introduced hints.
I
Version
hated
31,
hints.
big feature, made hints optional.
I hated them so much because the game it doesn't have that problem, right? Like even with cross keys now, like
I hated the hints for multiple reasons. That's one of them. I also hated that hints were kind of intentionally written to be value neutral. So like they were intentionally written in confusing and awkward ways so that you would read a hint and you could either say, I'm going to ignore this, or I'm going to commit everything to this. Like, catfish has a unique item. Ha ha, here's your thing.
Yeah. I had the worst luck with that one too, because I got a hint in Hera that footwear was in Skull Woods, and this was a league race against Megawatt. And I went into Skull Woods. It was the first chest on the right. I got my flippers. I left because there's only one more item, and I already got the hinted item, right?
And of course, item 2 was the boots.
The boots were in the vanilla big key chest of Skull Woods.
Yeah, and it's that like I certainly think it is possible that they could come up with a hint system that improves Link Past.
Sure.
I'm not convinced it's necessary. That sure as fuck was not it.
Yes, for sure.
And I think entrance hints were better than the hints that we got in vanilla, but
you had to like super decipher them because they were like some really strange.
It has done a lot of phenomenal work. I would not hire him as a copy editor.
Sure. For sure.
I mean, to this day, I still make offhanded references to Southwest Death Mountain Foothills Cave.
Right.
And I mean, and he wrote the original hints for Ocarina of Time too, and they were littered with very, very similar things, where like things that make sense to him, but if you're not him, or if your brain works in a different way, or you live in a different country, like you and I know what a jawbreaker is, obviously.
Right, but that
doesn't
mean
a kid from Sweden gonna know what a jawbreaker is.
Right.
And I said Sweden because I've had Goomba rants about that specific thing before.
That's hilarious. So we're getting close to the end. What do you feel like your relationship with Rando and the Rando community is now? Do you feel you're in a good spot?
I think I'm in a pretty good spot. I think I've accepted, and I think and I don't know, I'm not even sure I ever read there that I'm like a super mainstream central figure. But I think a lot of people know me as someone who's like, I'm happy to answer questions or be come to with advice on various things. And I really, really love seeing new runners out. Like, I can run my tournaments in my ways, or the ways of the, like, I mean, I'm not a dictator, but at least like in the ways of like the admin staff, and be like, tournament, this is going to be a good tournament. Like, I think I have a good reputation among those sorts of, and I mean, maybe if I wanted to, like, I think if I had run for Tark admin, there was a chance that I might have did. I don't know if it's a job I actually wanted to do. I mean, ultimately, that's why I didn't run, is that I wasn't sure it was a job I wanted to do. And if I wanted to run, I wanted to commit to it.
Yeah.
So I think it's one of those things that's like, I think I have kind of carved out my niche, and I think I'm okay there.
Yeah.
And I know anyone who's ever really talked to me one-on-one will testify that I am a person who is willing to listen to people's stuff, to like give feedback, to like give advice, who is generally not going to be particularly mean or harsh on you, or the kind of person who likes having people be mean or harsh to you. Like I love teaching people. I like making wide-ranging inclusive tournaments, because I think it's important for people who want to play and people who want to sort of have the ability to get into this stuff to actually be able to do it. And having a stepping stone, having tournaments that work both for veteran P players and for new players, like all these things are things that are really important to me. And I think I've carved out a nice niche there, and I'm very, very happy with it.
Awesome, man. All right, gonna ask you the last question I ask everyone. How do you handle tilt?
Better than I used to. I try really, really hard to just kind of, even when stuff goes bad, take deep breaths and remind myself, hey, you aren't dead. Bad things can happen. That doesn't necessarily mean you've lost. I had to do it in both my semifinal matches in the cross keys, where I had bad things happen, and a less veteran version of me would have freaked out, and it probably would have caused a mistake. Compounding mistake equals loss.
Yeah.
See my first main tournament match, even though I won it, sorry, Moogle Charm, where I had a 12-minute escape.
Wow.
But it's one of those things where it's just like I'm not necessarily great at it, but I try to do. I've tried to get better at it over time, and I just like a lot of it for me is just mindful as possible, and to really understand that in a lot of cases those things hurt you. And if you're in a position where you're hurting yourself, take a break.
Yeah.
Like legit, like not in that necessary race, but like if you're like in a position where you're like, I'm just dreading playing, stop.
Yeah.
And like there's nothing wrong with stopping and coming back. I think that's great, and I think that's healthy.
Yep. I mean, I'm a living proof you can stop and still come back and have a good time. But
I mean, I am too.
Yeah.
Like I've taken 6-month long breaks from this game before.
Yeah.
And I come back and I when I find a better routine for myself and find a healthier place, I mean it's good.
Yeah.
And it's good for people who are around me because I'm less of a wank to be around.
Yeah, for sure. All right, man. Thanks so much for doing this. I super appreciate it. I had a blast. I hope you did too.
Yeah, thanks. It was really fun.
Big thanks to Alaszun for coming on the show and ending season number 4. I think this is a fitting end to season number 4. Just big fan of Alaszun and the way he handles himself, and really interesting to hear his story. Like, there's a lot of stuff in there that I didn't know, even though we were pretty close for the first year or so as we were learning this game. So yeah, thanks to Alaszun. Really appreciate it. That's going to do it. That's going to do it for season number 4. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We're available everywhere. If you do get a chance to leave us a review, I'd really appreciate it, especially on Apple Podcasts. Even if you just click a star rating, that helps us out. I suck at all the metadating and the SEO stuff, so any help that I can get by giving reviews, I'll take it. 216pod.com has the links to the Discord and the feeds and everything that you need from a 216 standpoint. Would love to hear what you think about the show, about the season, about the future. What guests would you like to hear from on the show? If you're coming to SGL, we have a channel for that as well. Yeah, just a huge shout out. Thank you so much for listening. It really does mean a lot. And that's going to be a wrap on season 4. Really appreciate y'all. Thanks for listening.